In the last video, we worked with the components that are pre-built in a new Windows Phone app project. In this video, we're going to create our own and arrange them in what is known as a stack panel. At the end of this video, you'll have a project that will have some new user interface components laid out. We will use a combination of component types to build the controls in the next few videos, and although they won't work, our app will start to look closer and closer to the finished project with each step. Along the way, you'll get introduced to new component types, and we will give each of our components a unique name that will allow us to work with them when we build the logic behind the app layout in C# in the next chapter. So let's get started. If you're running through the course in order, you can stick with the project from the end of the last video. If you're starting fresh, you can access the starter version of this project with the course exercise files. Open the solution file, and you'll be at the same point that I'm at. Okay, the first thing we need to do is create our stack panel that will be used to contain and lay out our components. In XAML, there are generally two basic types of components. There are components that do things, and there are components that organize and lay out other components. The stack panel is one of the second type. As we saw in the last video, the stack panel is used to stack components vertically or horizontally. We need to do this in the content panel section of our app, which was after the title panel. If you look at Visual Studio, you'll see that the content panel code starts at line 48. It starts with some descriptive text, and then there is a component called a grid on line 49. A grid is another type of layout component. The grid component is a bit advanced, and we aren't going to cover it in this course. So for now, let's just leave it be. Just like with the previous video, you can add components using the design view, but it's important to understand the code so you can better work with it and modify it later. So to start, we're going to create a new stack panel component. On line 50, in between the opening and closing grid tags, write the following code. We're going to start with the less than symbol and start typing in stack panel. As you can see, Visual Studio shows us a list that matches the words we've already entered in. When stack panel is already highlighted, I can press Tab, and that will complete the sentence for me. I'm going to then close this tag with a greater than symbol, and you'll see that the end tag is already created for me automatically. I'm going to create a little bit of space here because I'm going to be adding in code inside these two tags. The default layout for a stack panel is vertical, which is what we want for this layout, so we don't need to add anything else to these tags. Now we can start to add in the individual components within our stack panel. So in between the two stack panel tags, on my screen it's currently on line 51, we can start adding in some of the components. The first is a text block, which is the same component we modified in the last video. To create a text block, we're going to use the same process we used for the stack panel. Start with a less than symbol, and then start typing in text block. Again, the code completion already shows that that's highlighted, so we can press Tab, and that will complete that for us. Now remember, XAML is an XML-based language, so you can use an opening and closing tags, or in this case, we can use a self-closing tag. It's a good idea to give our components a unique name. That way, if we ever need to change a value or attribute of it via code later, we have a name we can use to reference it. In XAML, you can use the x:"name attribute to give it a unique name. If you're familiar with XML languages, you'll see that this is a namespaced attribute. The X namespace is defined at the top of the project. Let's go ahead and give text block a unique name now. I'm going to go right after our text block statement here, and then type in x:"name. Press Tab to enter that in. Now this may be a review for some, but just in case, unique names or instance names don't have any special characters or spaces. An exception here is the underscore, which you'll see later in the course. There are also various capitalization best practices across languages. I tend to use the Pascal case in C# for component names. That means that the first letter is capitalized, and other names that are concatenated with the first are capitalized as well. So in this case, I'm going to call this amount label. Now that we have the basic tag, we can add attributes to customize it. We need to create the text attribute and add the text to display in the component. To do this, I'm going to go after our xName tag and then type in text. Now inside of this, I want to start putting in the text that I want to put into this particular component. So to match the user design style of Windows Phone, I'm actually going to put this in all caps. Amount of service or bill. Let's repeat this again for the second label, which we'll call tip label. I'm going to go to the end of the line, create a new line, and then start by creating a new text block. Use x:"name to give it a unique name. Again, we'll call it tip label, and then we'll enter in some text. In this case, I'm going to say tip percentage. Now, if you look onto the left, you'll see the design view. It's starting to stack these up on top of each other. That's why we're using a stack panel, because we want to stack these on top of each other in the layout of our application. All right, with that done, let's go ahead and create two more to finish out what we have to do. I'm going to create a new text block again, X name. This one we'll call tip header, and then we'll enter in some text. In this case, what we'll say is tip amount, close our tag, and we'll do this one more time, text block, X name. This one, let's call total header, text total amount. When you're done, you should have all the header tags in place, and the design view should look like mine. So as you can see, the stack panel handles all the layout of our components for us. With the headers in place within the content panel section of our code, we can now start placing interactive components. In the next video, we'll add a text box component into the first section of our layout.